Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, partnering with donors from all walks of life to improve southeastern Virginia through grants, scholarships, and leadership initiatives. Learn more at hamptonroadscf.org.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. The holiday season is in full swing, which means many of us are busy shopping for loved ones. So here's the question. Do you have a budget for all of those gifts? Are you using credit cards for your purchases? If you are, how will your credit score be affected? Up next on Another View, we're going to class for Credit 101. Financial literacy expert Will Roundtree has advice on all things credit and why it matters. And we pay tribute to Congressman Donald McEachin. Stay tuned. Another View will be right back after this national, regional, and local news from NPR and WHRO News.
Discussing today's topics from an African-American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday. And now you know we are in the season where there's tons of things going on. Want to share one event with you that I think you may be interested in. It is called Wonders of the Season, and it is being performed by Studio 360 Performing Arts. Now, this is a woman-owned, minority-owned Hampton Roads nonprofit organization that, quote, exists to cultivate artists and increase access to arts education through nurturing creative expression and empowering performance excellence. This is a dance studio, and they're having two performances on Saturday, December the 17th. One is at noon, and the other is at 1:30 p.m. at Chandler Hall, which is located on the campus of, in the Dean Fine Arts building on the campus of ODU. You can get tickets at Studio360performingarts.com, and they have students from ages, I believe, 7 to 70, I think is what their website said. So there's a lot of variety there, and I think it will be a beautiful Winter 2022 showcase called Wonders of the Season. For ticket information or for more information, again, go to Studio360performingarts.com. And there are a lot of things going on during this holiday season. And one thing that we have to think about is how much money we're going to be spending and how it affects our credit. So here's the question. There's holiday shopping going on, preparing meals, family and friend gatherings. It's a wonderful time, but expensive time of the year. And it's also the time that many of us rely on credit to get us through, and then we spend months paying off all the bills. Now, all of this can affect our credit score, and that's what we're going to talk about on today's Another View. But first, we begin our program with a tribute to Congressman Donald McEachin, who lost his life after the after effects of successful surgery for colorectal cancer. That happened a few years ago, but there were after effects, and he lost his life on this past Monday. Congressman McEachin was just reelected to Congress during the midterms. He was a fearless champion for his constituents in the 4th Congressional District, and as our Lisa Godley shares this tribute.
A thoughtful and principled legislator, respected by members on both sides of the aisle, is how 3rd District Congressman Bobby Scott describes his friend and colleague, Congressman A. Donald McEachin. McEachin passed away on Monday following a battle with colorectal cancer. He was often described as a gentle giant, and in Scott's words, a relentless champion for all Virginians. On Monday, the Congressman's chief of staff shared this on social media. Valiantly for years now, we have watched him fight and triumph over the secondary effect of his colorectal cancer from 2013. Tonight, he lost that battle. After graduating from American University, Donald McEachin pursued a law degree from the University of Virginia. He also had a Master's of Divinity from Virginia Union University. He was indeed a trailblazer. He was the first African American from a major party to be nominated for the position of Attorney General, and the third African American elected to Congress from the Commonwealth of Virginia. Prior to his time in the U.S. Congress, Donald McEachin served in the Virginia legislature. Virginia Senator Mamie Locke worked alongside McEachin for years.
Whenever he would take to the floor of the Senate, you could always expect words of wisdom. People would always listen because you knew he would have something profound to say, and it would be something that impacted whatever the issue was.
She says she always respected how sincere and compassionate he was. She remembers one time in particular when he spoke on the floor of the Virginia General Assembly.
He simply pushed his button, and when he was called on, he said, I get kind of tired of my colleagues always using the Bible as their source of confirmation for their arguments. He said, but I don't remember the issue that they're talking about being in the Bible. He said, but the word poor and poverty appears in the Bible, I'm certain, almost 200 times, but they never draw on that when it comes to talking about issues that will impact those who need it the most.
A. Donald McEachin was overwhelmingly reelected to office in November, his district encompassing Richmond, Petersburg, Emporia, Surrey, and about half of Southampton County. Prior to recent redistricting, Chesapeake and Suffolk were also a part of Virginia's 4th District. During his years in Congress, he served as a member of the House Committee on Energy and Commerce and the Committee on Natural Resources, pushing for legislation to address things like climate change, gun violence, and access to health care. Another View political analyst, Dr. Eric Claville, had this to say about the congressman.
Definitely someone that exemplified what a representative is for his community, for his district, and also for the Commonwealth. He was not only one that fought and defended the rights of the most vulnerable of our society, but he also understood the mission, and he served it well.
Donald McEachin was a lifetime member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated and the NAACP. He is survived by his wife of 36 years, Colette, the couple's 3 children, and 1 grandchild. Congressman Donald McEachin was 61.
And the Another View family extends our sincere condolences to the McEachin family and to all of those who loved him. We'll be right back. So that music reminds us that it is now the holiday times. Here's a question for you. What's your credit score? Is it the same score with each of the 3 major credit bureaus? What's a good score, a bad score? And why does any of this matter? Joining us to educate us on credit is Will Roundtree. He is founder and CEO of We Management Services in Las Vegas, Nevada. Good morning, Will. How are you?
Hey, good morning.
And it is morning where you are. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us.
A brisk morning in Las Vegas, might I add.
And brisk meaning what temperature is it there?
42 degrees.
Oh, it's the same as it is here in Hampton Roads. Wow. How about that? So, you are a financial advisor, guru. You're involved in finances, but you had some personal struggles of your own that started you on this improving and maintaining and enjoying your credit success. But you had a journey to get there. So can you share with us some of that journey?
Oh, yes, definitely had a journey. So originally born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I now live in Las Vegas. But, just like everyone else, I was not taught anything about finances growing up. We weren't taught it in school. We typically didn't talk about it at my dinner table. Mm-hmm. And so as I started to grow up, I went through life just like everyone else, praying and manifesting that my financial situation would get better. And so I started working for a company, and I thought I was going to retire from this company. And so I was there about 8 years. And then one day, abruptly, we went to work, and there were chains on the door. Didn't know, what I was going to do with my life. I had dropped out of college, but I had stumbled into entrepreneurship by way of direct sales. And so got into direct sales, didn't learn, didn't make any money. For people who's ever been in direct sales, that can be an industry that can be a bit of a learning curve, I like to say. But the one thing I took away from that industry was it taught me personal development. And so personal development really is what I often say what changed my life. And so got into that company, ended up meeting a mentor, and he not only taught me things about money and finances, but he made a comment to me. He said, Will, eventually credit will become the new dollar. Now, I didn't know what he meant by that at the time. This was 2005. I'm in my early 20s. I think I have life figured out, And so fast forward, I have an opportunity to move to Las Vegas and start building the organization that I was a part of within that direct sales organization. So moved to Las Vegas, and I quickly found out what he meant by credit would become the new dollar. I couldn't rent an apartment because my credit was bad. Couldn't purchase a vehicle without putting 20% down, and I couldn't even get the type of vehicle I really wanted. They always brought something from the back that nobody wanted to purchase. So I remembered a quote. They said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. And I kept trying to figure out why is it that I'm keep hitting these financial pitfalls? And I remember going back to that saying, eventually credit will become the new dollar. I noticed my credit was bad. And how I was able to put that together, having bad credit is expensive.
Yeah.
Again, going back, you're putting 2 to 3 times down on a deposit to rent an apartment. You're putting 20% down on a vehicle. When you need to borrow money, you typically can't go the traditional routes. I think at one point I owed money to every payday loan in Las Vegas. My picture is probably still in some of those buildings. And so I decided, you know what, I need to make a change in order for there to be a change in my journey. And so I started to learn about credit, but not only the basics of what credit is and how to restore my credit, I started to learn what credit was really meant for, what the purpose was. Because, again, a lot of us, unfortunately, in our community, we assume credit is just for consumer purchases, to go shopping, to go out to eat, to take vacations, or having credit to buy a house and to buy a car. I started to learn that credit was quickly becoming one of the new currencies that wealthy people utilize to start creating their wealth. And so that my personal journey is what led me to this path. And I often say I was fortunate that I went through all of those experiences. Some people call them failures, but I call them experiences because if none of those things had happened, I wouldn't be where I am today. And so after kind of seeing the power of what credit can do, and it took me 2 years to restore my credit, I was able to purchase my first vehicle with no money down or out of pocket. I was able to become a homeowner and coming from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, I never fathomed ever being able to own a home. It seemed like something so far out of reach for me. And so once I saw the benefits of credit and what it did for me and how it changed my life, I had to tell everybody. And so I didn't get into this space to be a credit repair person. I got into this space really to educate people. That has always been my focal point in what I do.
And is education the major, particularly as we're talking about the African-American community, where you spend a lot of time educating people, is it the lack of education that's the major stumbling block in terms of why people struggle so?
I think it's a combination of a couple things. Education is definitely one of them because of the lack of information. Like I mentioned, having bad credit is expensive. And companies make billions of dollars off of our ignorance of not knowing about credit, or by us having these cliches of, oh, I don't need credit, and keeping bad credit. The second thing is because, and I actually did a kind of a breakdown of why credit was not taught to us or why we have been conditioned to think that credit is bad. The second thing is because the power of credit. So not only is there a lack of information and education, but there's a lack of knowledge in the power of what credit is supposed to be utilized for. And I think once we really start to see and put those things together, it really would change the landscape of how people think about credit.
Okay. All right. So let's take it to the basics. Let's talk about exactly what is credit and what is a credit score.
Definitely. So credit is a 3-digit number that is pretty much, I have to say, your financial fingerprint. Companies, creditors, banks, lenders, they utilize this 3-digit number pretty much to dictate anything that you deal with within your life. So people don't realize, because they think it's just for purchases, your credit score determines the school zone your kids go to school in. Because if you have bad credit, you typically have to live in less than desirable neighborhoods because it costs more to live in more affluent neighborhoods. Your credit score can determine a potential employer that you may want to work for. Any industry in the finance industry, they typically run your credit. I recently learned a few years ago that once you pass the bar, if you have horrible credit, you can't be a practicing attorney in some states. So your credit not only dictates you financially, but it can dictate the path and journey of your life. So essentially what a credit score is a number that is calculated through 5 things, and I'll briefly go on with those 5 things that make up a credit score to determine your credit worthiness.
Okay, so what are those 5 things?
To be able to borrow money. So those 5 things. 1, payment history. Do you pay your bills on time? That makes up 35% of your score. 2, your credit utilization. Now, your credit utilization is based upon the balances on your credit card. So if you have, let's say, $1,000 credit card, and if you max that card out, it's going to drastically impact your score. You actually want to keep your total credit card limit at a 30% or below balance. So if you have a $1,000 credit card, you don't want to exceed $300. That makes up 30% of your score. 15% of your score is your payment history. Your payment history, meaning the length of your credit profile. The age of it. So this is why it's important. If you have credit cards that are like 10, 15 years old and you pay them off, if you close that card or you shut down that account, your score will drop drastically. So this is why you don't want to close old credit card accounts. Even if you pay it off, just put it in a shoebox and put that up. So the length or the age of your credit profile is 15% of your score. And then the last 20%, 10% of it is the mixture of your credit. And that's the revolving credit and installment. Revolving would be credit cards. Installment that would be anything with a fixed payment, like a mortgage, or auto loan, student loans. And then the last 10% is new credit. They want to see you get new credit over time. So those 5 components is what makes up your credit score.
Okay, hold on a second. I want to put the number out there so people can call us and ask their questions. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Those are the numbers to call to join our conversation. What questions do you have about repairing your credit, about how to start credit, or anything that is credit related? Give us a call, 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Let me go back to something that you said about if you had a credit card and it's 15 years old, you paid it off. Should you utilize it every now and then to keep it active, or if you put it in the shoebox, will they close it?
Yes, so I actually learned this the hard way. I remember I had, one of those starter credit cards, and I was in a phase of rebuilding my credit. I didn't use it for 3 years, and they actually closed the account, and my score dropped. So I'll often tell people, use your credit cards for things you're typically going to pay cash for. So I would use it for my gas purchases. I would use it for, grocery store runs. I would use it for things that, maybe I would typically spend $20 here, $30 there, because one is going to keep that payment history going, which again, 35% of your score is payment history. And then, I'm not even sure how in depth you want to go. I'm actually a firm believer. I would rather use my credit card than my debit card. I haven't used the debit card in 2 years. Absolutely.
Really? So that because the continued use keeps your credit score high? Is that what you're saying?
So the reason I don't use my debit card, and a lot of people who are in this space and understand the power of credit, one is, yes, to keep the usage of that credit card, but then two, because there's so much fraud going on, one of the things that a lot of people may or may not know, when I swipe my debit card, if that debit card gets compromised, I have to now fight with the banks to get my money back. If I use my debit card, my credit card, that's the bank's money. So anytime my credit card is compromised, guess who's going to fight to get their money back? The bank. So my money is more protected by MasterCard, Visa, or American Express versus whoever my bank is. So one, because it helps me to build my credit, and two, because my money is protected, especially in this era when we're dealing with so much fraud and people stealing credit card numbers and debit card numbers and all of those things.
So will we hear, you see these commercials where they're saying, boost your credit scores by adding your utility bills or your cable bills or, things of that sort. Does that actually translate into your actual credit score? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I see so many people that have kind of fell for that bait. And this is what I mean. So now, it's kind of like a risk versus reward. So Experian Boost talks about, yes, add your utility bills. They call this alternative credit. Now, you can add your utility bills, your cell phone, your streaming, and it will temporarily, or at least on paper, boost your credit score, only on Experian. But here's the thing that they don't teach us, and this is why information is so important. When you go and apply for credit, let's say you want to purchase a home or purchase an auto loan or whatever the case may be, there's something called DTI, debt to income ratio. That means for whatever your income is, they're looking at the threshold of how much debt you have or expenses. Now, to qualify for a home, they typically do not want you to be over a 43% debt to income ratio. If you add your utility bills, and for those who have done this practice before, go and look at your credit report, and what happens is they report the balance. So if you have an electric bill that's $500, your cell phone bill is $600, I've seen some cell phone bills, that you've now added an additional $1,100 of debt to your debt to income ratio. So although on paper your score increased, it also increased your debt to income ratio. So it actually does not benefit you in the long run. So you got to be very careful, and this is one of the things I often talk about.
So there are three different credit bureaus that will report your credit score and your credit history, and that's Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. Correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Will all three of them give you the exact same credit score?
So all three of the bureaus, they don't even talk to each other. People think they're cousins or something. I don't know. so I've literally seen Experian can have a 700, Equifax can have a 600, and TransUnion can have a 500. They do not all report the same information. They don't even report at the same time. Sometimes they don't update at the same time. And some creditors don't even report to all three of the bureaus. All companies that report to credit bureaus have to pay to submit information. So this is why sometimes people who may have purchased an automobile and they went with like a mom and pop dealership or what they call a buy here, pay here, where you buy from them and you also pay them directly, they may not report anything to the credit bureaus. So no, they don't report the same thing. They update differently. So this is why it's important to monitor all three bureaus, not just one, not just two, but all three of them.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Let's talk to Sarah in Williamsburg. Hi, Sarah. You're on the air.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Okay. What's your question?
I was calling because I have two younger kids, and I know growing up, we didn't learn much about finances, just like the gentleman on the air. And I was wondering, what's the best way to start teaching our kids about finances and credit?
Okay, thank you so much for the call. Will, did you hear her question?
Absolutely. Well, the first thing I'm going to say is I would start by picking up my book, Credit is King. So and I say that, seriously and jokingly. One, because it's a book that I wrote that goes into not only the basics of understanding credit, how to maintain it, but also how to build your children's credit. A lot of people don't know you can actually start building your children's credit at the age of 13. And so by the time they're 18, they will generate a credit score. But the basics of, and I'll even talk about how I teach my 12-year-old son. One is I first got him a debit card. He has his own bank account. He has a debit card. And I teach him the value of $1. I teach him the value of debits and credits and different things of that nature. And I let him know, hey, if you borrow $10 from me, you have to pay me back. So when he wants to buy his video game credits and all of this, and so I'm utilizing these different lessons to teach him. Now, of course, I give him his money back, but I want him to get used to understanding if you borrow money ahead of the time when you're getting your allowance, you have to pay dad back. So I'm showing him just the small steps on how banks transact when you're borrowing money. But then I'm going to start building his credit at the age of 13. And by doing so, you can actually add your children onto your credit card as what's called an authorized user. So for anyone who has a credit card, and it has to be a credit card, not a debit card, you call your bank, you tell them you want to add your child on as an authorized user. Now, you don't give them the card, but what happens is that payment history on that credit card will start to report on their credit. So as soon as they're 18, they'll generate a score. But there is a caveat.
Okay, go ahead.
You want to make sure that you don't get any 30-day late payment.
Yeah,
because
that's
if you get a 30-day late, it's going to affect your child. And make sure you keep your credit card balances low.
Yeah,
so
I was going to say that that's really important, is that your credit needs to be good if you're going to do this.
Your credit has to be good. So as long as you do those things, I've been showing my clients how to do this for the past 7 years, and they found out that the greatest graduation gift is gifting their child a 700 credit score, gifting them the ability to be more savvy and astute in understanding credit, because typically, where do people ruin their credit? In college. So this has been a really good transition in helping them transition into adulthood.
If you're just joining us, we're talking about you and your credit score with financial literacy expert Will Roundtree, founder and CEO of We Management Services in Las Vegas, Nevada. Will, tell us the name of your book one more time.
Credit is King.
Credit is King.
And I wrote the book in 2016. It's more of a credit manual, and I actually wrote it from the perspective that an 8th grader can pick it up and read it. So there's no big industry jargon. It's not terminology and only inside financial verbiage. It's a very simple read.
And is it on Amazon, or where do you find it?
Yes, you can purchase it on all online platforms. Okay. The most familiar is Amazon, and there's also an audio version as well.
Okay, that is great. We've got a lot of questions. Let's go to David in Gloucester. Hi, David. You're on the air.
Hi. Good afternoon.
Hi.
I just want to say I've been enjoying the discussion, and
thank you.
I went through this same exact thing, for most of my adult life, and I just want to share my experience real quick. I'm in my 50s. I was born in the 60s, so credit was never even discussed at all. I watch my parents, pay for things with credit cards, and I naturally do the same thing. And then, you go through a divorce and this and that. Next thing you know, you're stuck with like $60,000 worth of credit, across credit card bills across several different credit cards. And I think, 2-3 years ago, I just decided I was just going to, have to get it all paid off. And I did, retire from the military, but so that helped. But so when I retired, I got a job, and pretty much everything from that job went straight to pay it off. And so it's all paid off. And I think my credit score got as high as like 825 or something like that, or whatever the highest is. It got within a couple. And then I can tell it kind of goes up and down a little bit, but it's still around in the 8, 10 or something like that. So it can be done. It's hard. And, you know, I was doing it by myself. You know, I have a spouse that stayed at home and, you know, took care of the house and everything, and that's great. But, you know, if you're a couple, if you're both working, you know, it can be done. Just got to tighten your belts and get it done. There's so many ways to save money. There's so many ways to save money. I see people wasting money.
Okay,
all the time.
David, thanks so much for the call. We appreciate that. Will, do you have a formula or a way for people to get started? You know, like David's journey when he just said it's time for me to pay off these credit cards and get this under control. Are there certain steps you should take?
Absolutely. The first step is I tell people is you have to face that fear. You'd be surprised how many people are scared to look at their credit. You know, it's like one of those things that's almost even taboo. I remember when I first got in this industry, I used to whisper to people I helped do credit because it was such a black cloud of people who talked about credit. But I think David hit the nail on the head, and I'll tell you why. A great percentage of people who have credit challenges, it's not that their credit is bad. They have too much debt, and it's usually credit card debt. And as I mentioned, 30% of our score is tied to credit card, is tied to your credit card debt. So here's what I mean. Let's say you have one credit card and it's $300. If it's maxed out, your score can drop 150 points over $300. Wow. And so this is why you have to understand the components that make up the credit score. And so going back to what he mentioned about how he got some income and paid it down, sometimes people just need to pay their debt down. Whatever you have to do, go get a second job, sell some of the things that we purchased, you know, in previous holidays we don't need anymore. Like we have to get those credit card debts down. Another one is those pesky collection accounts. So for people who had accounts that may have went to collections or charged off, there's a couple strategies that I talk about. Now, I actually have a video on YouTube that has over 1 million+ views that says why you should not pay your collection account. So I actually tell people never pay your collection account until you actually know why or how to pay them. Here's what I mean.
What do you mean? Yeah.
So let's say you have a collection account and it's 6 years old. Okay. Now they have what's called the statute of limitation, and it varies by state. Some states don't have one. And this is the time frame that they have to sue you on debt. Okay. So now, once a debt goes past the statute of limitations, they can no longer sue you. Now, also, typically debt is supposed to report on your report 7 years from the last date of activity, meaning the last time money was transacted on that account. So 6-year-old account, and let's say one day you wake up and you get a moral compass and you say, you know what, I want to pay this account off. So you call the collection agency, you pay them, and then once their credit score updates, your score will actually drop. Because what happens is that the algorithms on how the credit reporting system works is they don't calculate it based upon the dollar amount of the collection account. They calculate it by what are called reason codes. So a $0 collection account has the exact same impact as a $10,000 collection account. So when you paid it, it did what's called updated the last date of activity. So it didn't remove the collection account. It just now reported it as a $0 collection account. So I tell
but it's
people,
it's still considered a debt. I got you.
Absolutely. So this is why I say why you shouldn't pay your collection without knowing that. So if you do decide to pay it, you want to actually pick up the phone, call that collection agency, and do what's called a pay for deletion, meaning, hey, I want to pay this account in full in lieu of you guys deleting it from my credit report. Not a settlement, not a settle for less. You want to pay it in full and ask them to delete it and ask for a deletion letter. Or you can flat out dispute the debt. Even though the debt is yours, if they're not reporting the debt accurately per the Fair Credit Reporting Act, meaning if they're not reporting it down to the penny accurately, they have to delete it off of your credit report if you delete it the proper way and use the right language and all of those things. So there's several different ways that you can start to repair your credit immediately. But the first thing is let's get out of denial. Let's stop being scared. We have to look at our credit report. I say monthly.
And is it easy to understand your credit report?
It's easy once you know what you're looking at.
Okay.
I think the reason people are scared of it because it is foreign. But I go in and I teach high school kids how to look at their credit report. So it really is simple, because here's the thing you really want to look at. When you pull up your credit report, first thing you're going to see the summary. Make sure that all of your information is phonetically accurate, meaning if you have a common name, someone with the name that's common to yours, their information can land on your credit report, especially if you live within the same geographical area, because credit bureaus identify you by name and address, not even always by your social.
Oh, wow.
Secondly, making sure your date of birth is accurate, the last 4 digits of your social. Make sure all of those things are accurate in a summary.
Mm-hmm.
Next, when you look in the accounts area, what you want to look at is seeing who the creditor is, make sure it's one of your creditors, and then look at your balance and limit. So for credit cards, again, you want to make sure that your credit balance is less than 30% of the limit. So if you have a $1,000 credit card, make sure that the limit is below 300. Mm-hmm. If you're over 300, that will impact your score. All you have to do is pay it down and you will see your score increase. If you have anything reporting negatively, and it'll say in the notes, collection account, charge-off account, you want to dispute it. You want to pay it in full and ask for a deletion letter. So it's very simple once you know what you're looking at.
Mm-hmm. But the first step is to go look.
Please take a look at your credit. Absolutely.
Okay, we have another call. Let's see, Charvella. I hope I pronounced that correctly. From Williamsburg.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, it's Charvela. Thank you so much, Barbara, for having this discussion today, and to your guests for being here. You mentioned earlier about learning how credit is used to build wealth. I just would like to hear more from you about what that looks like.
Okay. Thank you, Charvela. Thank you. I appreciate that. She wants to know about, you mentioned earlier about credit being used to build wealth.
Oh, yeah. We could do a 10-hour workshop on this. This is my favorite subject. So about 15 years ago, I heard one of my favorite authors, Robert Kiyosaki, say he bought investment property using credit, and it blew my mind. And so I said, I have to figure out what he did. And so I started to learn people who are affluent, wealthy people leverage credit all the time. Credit was really put in place for us to create wealth. And then I started to learn there are 3 pillars of wealth building: credit, understanding financing, and then building assets. So here's what I mean. I use my credit to go and invest in businesses or invest in real estate. Here's an example. Let's say I get a line of credit for $50,000, and then I find an investment property for $100,000. I only have to put down 20% on that property, which is $20,000. So I'll take $20,000 from my line of credit, use it as a down payment, and the bank will finance the other 80%. Now, someone may hear that and say, well, Will, you're using debt to get debt. Well, the thing is debt is what makes people rich. It's that people are only familiar with using unstructured debt. That's when you're buying a house you can't afford, buying a vehicle you can't afford. So unstructured debt is what get people in trouble. Structured debt is what make people wealthy. So I take $20,000 from my line of credit. I purchase an investment property. All I have to do is find an investment property or an investment vehicle that's going to pay me enough to service all of the debt and give me a return on investment. You learn how to master that, it will make you an insane amount of money passively. And this is how most seasoned investors build their wealth. People think that an investor is saving money and saving 20% and pulling money from their full. This is not how investors invest. When you think about even crowdfunding or hedge funds, what do? They borrow money. When banks are utilizing our bank deposits, what are they doing? They're leveraging our money. I'm just showing people how to reverse engineer that process and leverage the banks to invest and
So
then pay them their percentage back.
So well, let's continue with your example. So you borrowed, you have 50,000 in credit. You put 20 down on this investment property. When you say you use the money that it served to service that debt, in other words, are you selling that property and then using that money to pay back the other things, or can you talk us through the rest of it?
Yes. So I'm what's called a buy and hold investor, which means I buy real estate and then I hold it and I rent it out. So I'm a landlord.
Okay.
So going back to that example, I take the 20,000, I invested in an asset, a property. I put the 20,000 down, and so let's say the rent I'm collecting is $1,000 a month. Okay. Now the 20,000 that may cost me $250, and then my mortgage on the 80,000, because it's over 30 years, may cost me, let's say, $300. So my mortgage, my total debt is $550, but my rent is $1,000. So I'm now making $450 a month, every single month. That is now what's called passive income. This is how people create wealth. But not only that, now I have an asset that is appreciating, and this is where it gets really fun. Now I can also borrow against my asset in the future, completely tax-free. This is why wealthy people love investment vehicles, and this is the two areas where wealthy people thrive, and that's understanding credit and understanding assets, because you want to protect your money. It helps you make money, and it gives you a vehicle that appreciates that you can always borrow against tax-free.
Wow. Okay, we have a couple of questions from online, so let's go through those. Chanel from Williamsburg wants to know, how do you start repairing your credit if you have very little money to start with?
Great question. So in the back of my book, Credit is King, I actually have sample letters. I think we've probably sold almost 50,000 copies since 2016. And people have literally just went through that book and have been able to spot out, first of all, what the symptoms of what's harming their credit. So generally, there's only a couple things. One, you have collection accounts or charge-offs. You got to dispute those accounts or pay them and ask for a deletion letter. Two, you have late payment. So you can send what's called a goodwill letter to help remove some of those late payments. And then thirdly, your credit card debt is too high. So you either have to come up with a strategy, go get a second job, start selling things online. Like we have to get into this mode by any means necessary. Like David said, he went out and got a job. Sometimes we just have to come together as a tribe and do those things. But it's really only three things that typically impact or affect people's credit. Now, I do want to make one quick mention of something to never do. And this is typically what I see a lot of people do. Never get into what's called a debt consolidation company. They actually make your credit worse, and it's worse than filing bankruptcy, because you're locked into this program of paying this debt back for 3 to 7 years. And if you miss a payment, it starts the whole process all over again, and that debt just stays on your credit. And once you finish paying the debt through the debt consolidation company, your score is still horrible. So there are different strategies. And again, this is why I host so many free classes. This is why I do what I do on social media. I have tons of videos on YouTube, and that's why I also wrote the book Credit is King.
So does it matter then if you have, well, two things. First, go back to payday loans. Are they reported on your credit report?
So payday loans typically will not, unless you default.
Okay. If
you default. Now, I tell people, if you can, stay away from payday loans unless you know what you're getting into. The average payday loan, the interest rate on that is in the hundreds of percent. And they actually hope that you default, because the longer you have to reset that payment over, the more that they can get money out of, the more the money they can get out of you. So they said the average person who borrows $500 from a payday loan, the average repayment is $5,000 for those who have to keep resetting that loan. Most people never get out of those. Wow. And this is why credit is so important, because if you're in a jam and you have to borrow $500 to, cover some gap in your month in your bills, and you go get a payday loan. $500 can cost you, as we mentioned, $5,000. It's cheaper for me to use credit for, like, let's say, a personal $500 loan from my bank, because now my interest rate may only be 20%. So this is why I say having bad credit is expensive.
Sally from Virginia Beach wants to know, how can an early 20-something build credit? What are the top 3 ways, especially when you have student loans to pay?
So student loans is definitely one of those things that no one can seem to get a handle on. But let's just say this 20-year-old has no credit. They have student loans, but the student loans are in good standing, because I'm assuming they probably are still in college. Well, as long as you are still in college or your student loans aren't late, the student loans aren't hurting your score. So unless you miss a payment. But the quickest way to build a credit profile, especially for someone who's young, who has no debt, is to become an authorized user on somebody's credit. And so, again, find a family member, a friend who has a good credit profile, ask them to add you on as an authorized user to a credit card. They are not giving you the card, so it doesn't hurt them. All you're doing is renting their credit history. Once they add you on as an authorized user, after 30 days in that cycle, you will now have a credit score. And then that's when I would recommend you either go and get like a secure credit card. You can apply for a starter credit card where they may give you a low limit. I typically tell people stay away from department store cards, but start with your traditional credit card. And if you have a bank, most banks offer starter credit cards, especially once you've developed a relationship with them. And so if you're 20, make sure you have a bank account, establish a relationship with them, and then you can even start with your first credit application with your primary bank. So those are some of the things you can do immediately.
So if you become an authorized user on a relative's credit, and once you've established your own credit and so forth, should that relative then take you off as an authorized person?
So it would definitely be up to their discretion.
Okay.
It's something that I tell people, use it as a short-term strategy. So yes, they definitely can take you off, especially if it's someone who, possibly may be erratic by using their credit. And if they have to max it out, it now can impact you. Right. So again, when I'm working with my clients, I typically tell them, hey, just add them on as an authorized user. We leverage that so we can now go and build your child's credit or whoever we're helping credit. And then, yes, you can remove them.
And that's very different than being a cosigner.
Complete different. Co-signing is something I do not condone.
Okay, explain the difference so that people understand.
All right, absolutely. So an authorized user, you're both not going on the application. Again, essentially, you are renting someone's credit history, and I use that in kind of as a layman term.
Got you.
When you are a co-signer, let's say I'm looking to purchase a car. I remember when I was 24 years old, my credit was really bad. They told me I had to find a co-signer. I didn't want to do it because I didn't want to put anyone else in a position, because typically when you co-sign for someone, it usually always goes bad, about 98% of the time statistically. And so a co-signer is, I have bad credit and I call my mother or a relative and I ask her with her good credit to essentially assume financial responsibility if I cannot make the payment. And so let's say they co-sign for me and then I stop making payment. Guess what happens to my mother credit? Right. Now her credit is ruined. So I have a thing. This is why we have to teach our children financial responsibility, teaching them to understand credit. And this is how you avoid co-signing for their first vehicle when they're in their 18, 19, or 20. You start building their credit at a teenager. By the time they're 18, or whenever they're ready to purchase their first vehicle, or when you're ready to help them purchase their first vehicle, their credit score is at least been calculated so that they can go out there and potentially get their own vehicle, rent their own first apartment. So this is why we have to teach our children these strategies.
Mm-hmm. So we've got about 4 minutes left in this in our segment here, but what pieces of advice would you give to people right now, especially as we're entering into 2023, to start off the year and making this a priority, to fixing their credit and building their credit as a priority in 2023?
Okay, so the first thing I want to say is for Black Friday, there was $9.1 billion spent on online shopping, and the credit card debt was through the roof. So the first thing I have to say is let's stop using our credit for consumer purchases. That's not what credit is meant to be used for. So credit is a tool. Another thing, we don't have to be scared of credit. People are like, oh, I'm scared of credit. Credit is bad. It's negative. Credit cards are bad. No, people who are irresponsible financially with money are bad with credit. So first of all, I always want to dispel that myth. Mm-hmm. Next, wherever your credit is, if it's bad, challenged, it can always be repaired. So let's not put ourselves in this funk going into the holiday season, and let's not put ourselves into a credit deficit trying to please all of these unrealistic consumer goals and purchasing the latest and greatest. So know your budget, know how much you make, know your expenses, and then if someone does want to start rebuilding their credit, go and pull their credit report. You can actually go to annualcreditreport.com and pull a free copy of your credit report. Now, they also have online credit monitoring services. Yes, there is a fee. If you can afford it, I always say make the $20 investment per month so you can see your credit every single month. And when people say they can't afford an additional $20 a month, I ask them, how much is their cable bill? Because if you're paying more than $50 for cable, you can afford credit monitoring. So we have to make this a priority. Once you pull your credit report, see what the things on there that is impacting that, and then let's correct that. Let's stay away from all of these pseudo type of strategies that are only short term and don't benefit you long term. And so, and then of course you can go to my YouTube, you can pick up my book. But it's something that we have to become more conscious and really take seriously going into the holiday and going into the new year of 2023.
Tell us your website, Will.
So my website is www.wemanagementservices.com, and that's WE managementservices.com.
We must have you back again so that we can continue this conversation. Anytime. Thank you so very, very much.
Pleasure is all
That's
mine.
Will Roundtree. He is founder and CEO of We Management Services in Las Vegas. And as we close out 2022 and look forward to 2023, take the time to repair, increase, and or maintain your credit score. Please share this show with a friend. Go to anotherviewradio.org and download the podcast. And don't forget to sign up for our eView newsletter. It's a once-a-week reminder of upcoming shows. We're on Facebook, and I'm on Twitter at Barbara Ham Lee. Next week on Another View, the Another View Roundtable with thoughts on 2022 and what to look forward to in the new year. Our theme music is an original composition created especially for Another View by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Jordan Christie is our audio engineer, and Dr. Barry Graham, he answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone, and let's get together again next Thursday at noon for Another View.
Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, carrying out your charitable wishes forever, whether it's helping shelter animals, feeding the homeless, enhancing the arts, or supporting students. Learn more at leaveabequest.org.